This video is about conserving water in the landscape. There's a couple of options depending on whether you're working with existing plants or whether you can refresh the entire landscape. If you're stuck with the plants that you have, you can be more precise with the irrigation, adjusting how much water you're delivering and just reducing the amount of water overall. If it's an option, you can also use another source of water, like graywater or reclaimed water, but those have their own issues. If you have the option to convert your landscape, then you can look at replacing high water plants with low water plants. A lot of landscape plants, especially woody plants, can tolerate being watered a lot less than what people normally give them. This is called the minimum irrigation, which is basically the minimum amount of water you could give to a plant that would still sustain its function and its looks. You have to keep a couple of things in mind when you're switching to minimum irrigation. You do have to do this slowly and to transition the plants off what they were originally getting. Otherwise, even a drought-tolerant species can become stressed as a result. This happens a lot when people stop watering their lawns and there's trees growing in them. Even a native low-water tree can become dependent on that water, and to suddenly go from regular shallow irrigation to no irrigation at all is going to really damage that tree. Native species or drought-tolerant species might not need to be watered because they're adapted to the rainfall patterns that happen in your area. But they can only do that because water's being stored in the soil. In drought years, they may still need supplemental watering because the soil moisture reservoir is not as full as during normal years. If you have a young tree that isn't fully established yet, this is not the time to mess around with the watering. Most trees, including native trees, still need quite a bit of water to get established. It's only when they're mature that you can start cutting down on the irrigation. If you have the option to use a different source of water, that's also one way of cutting down on your use of the clean potable water. This might look like using gray water from your house or using reclaimed or recycled water from the municipality. It's important to keep a source of the clean water because you need to be able to flush the soil every so often. The issue with using something like a reclaimed water is that there's no way of removing the inorganic substances like the salts and the metals, at least not in a cost-effective way. So when you get reclaimed water, it generally has more nutrient content, it has more salts, and so it's not as high quality of a water. There are certain species that will be more sensitive to heavy metals and salts, and those will be damaged if you're irrigating with reclaimed water. If you have poor drainage on your site, you also don't want to use this kind of water because you won't be able to leach out those salts. Since the water also has nutrients, you want to decrease your fertilizer as well. If you find yourself dealing with situations like this, look up some resources for managing salinity in the landscape. You can build water conservation into the design phase. A simple way is to create hydrozones. These are portions of the landscape where you put plants that have similar water needs, and that means that they can all be watered by a single controller. And if there's a plant inside that zone that happens to need a little bit more water, you can always add another emitter or something like that. If you want to do it more intense, you can put in xeriscaping, which is low water landscapes. These are plants that will look good with less water or the minimum irrigation. You're not going to put in any turf or frequently irrigated plants. Sometimes these are done up with desert plants, but that might not be appropriate for your area if you get a lot of rain. Those plants are not going to do well in those conditions. Xeriscapes require more planning, and often there are rebate programs from the government that help reduce the cost of converting your landscape.